At a time and in an era when a lot of the news and information I give you on the podcast is negative, it's bad news, it's bad things happening to the country, there are a few bright spots, and one of them is school choice. There's a veritable school choice revolution that is rolling across the United States. And I think it's going to keep gathering force and gathering momentum. And here, oddly enough, we have COVID, at least partly to thank, for two reasons. One is the extreme restrictions imposed under COVID convinced a lot of parents, this is outrageous. The government cannot do this to our children. We parents need to kind of take control of our children's education and not delegate it to the schools. But number two, you also had parents for the first time having their kids learning from home. And so parents realized, look at the stuff that they're teaching our kids. Look at the indoctrination. Look at the craziness. Look at all the sexually explicit and perverse stuff that's being propagandized on our kids. And parents are like, enough is enough. We're out of here. And so, of course, one option is homeschooling, but that's not practical for everyone. Or send your kid to a private school, but that's often expensive. Remember, if you send your kid to a private school, not only are you paying the private school tuition, but you then also are paying taxes, property taxes and other forms of taxes that are funding the public schools. So you're really paying twice. So the basic idea of the school choice revolution is to take these dollars that the government is allocating to schools and put it in the hands of the parents and the kids. In other words, these scholarships, as we now call them, are given to the parents, and the parents are able to choose. Do they want to send their kids to a public school? Okay, then you assign the money over there. On the other hand, if you want to send your kid to a private school or a Christian school, you assign the money over there. And so this is a wonderful thing. By the way, the idea goes all the way back to the 1980s. In the Reagan era, we used to call it vouchers. But very interestingly, the idea never really got off the ground. Public schools were really powerful, and many Republicans in Midwestern states and elsewhere supported public schools. And they would not hear of this idea of taking what, as they called it, public school money and allowing parents to deploy it toward private schools. But all of this has changed. And the latest guy to jump on the bandwagon, Ron DeSantis. Now, Ron DeSantis, when he jumps on the bandwagon, usually declares it's his bandwagon. And so sure enough, here we go. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed universal school choice into law. Now, I want to emphasize right away how good this is. This is universal school choice. This is not a case where you're basically picking kids who are from really poor families or a particular neighborhood and saying, listen, the schools in inner city Milwaukee are terrible, so we're going to give those parents a choice. No, every parent in Florida has a choice, and that means that all 1.3 million students in Florida can now decide if they want their money allocated to a public school or to a private school of their choice. And the press release from Florida says that this will, quote, further cement Florida's position as the nation's leader in school choice. Now, there are other states that have already passed school choice legislation. This is worth noting. There are 6 states that have already passed it: Utah, Iowa, Arizona, West Virginia, and Arkansas. Very recently, I think I saw on television Republican Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders signing the education reform bill, which expands school choice dramatically and actually adopts a plan for the state to adopt universal school choice by 2025, by the academic year 25-26. There are more than 50 school choice pieces of legislation that are making their way. And apparently states that are now in line, these are obviously Republican states, that could potentially pass school choice legislation in the near future: Idaho, Indiana, Ohio, and Wyoming. So all of this is a way of saying that this is a very positive development. Our public schools, we all know, are in terrible shape. In fact, there have been some recent surveys of public school students in Baltimore and elsewhere. Now, these admittedly are inner city schools, but they found that not a single student, not one, is proficient in reading or math. Think about that. Normally, there's a distribution. It could be that a school has gotten really bad and there's only a handful of kids who can do the work. But think of how bad a school has to be where there's no kid who's actually proficient in either math or in reading. This is a scandalous situation. It disproportionately, yes, affects minority communities, but it's a nationwide problem. School choice is not going to be a panacea. There are problems of wokeness in private schools, just like in public schools. There are Christian schools that are way too namby-pamby and not explicit and bold in teaching Christian doctrine. But courts, by the way, have held that there's no bar in allocating this public money in a non-discriminatory way where parents can choose between public schools and private schools and Christian schools. So even though this is not a sort of one-step solution to all our educational problems, it's certainly a positive start.